Please help my mama. The billionaire is beating her. The scream ripped through the quiet of Greenwood Hills like a bolt of lightning before a summer storm. Neighbors froze. Dogs barked. A coffee mug shattered on someone's porch. It was the kind of cry that didn't just travel through air, it tore through hearts. And it came from a barefoot little girl running down the spotless suburban street, tears streaking her cheeks. Her green dress was torn at the hem, her tiny hands trembling as she stumbled toward a row of parked motorcycles. If you were standing there, you'd have seen the panic in her eyes, pure, desperate, and innocent. It's the kind of moment you don't forget. So before we go any further, let me ask you this. What would you do if a child ran toward you screaming for help? Would you freeze or would you move? Comment below. Because what happened next shocked everyone on that street. And stay with me because this story will take you places you won't expect. That morning had started like any other in Greenwood Hills, California. The sun was soft, the air smelled faintly of jasmine, and behind the tall iron gates of the Cole mansion, wealth gleamed in every direction. Inside, Emily Harper was already at work. She moved quietly through the glass corridors, her mop gliding across marble floors that reflected her tired face. Years of scrubbing, polishing, and silence had shaped her into a shadow in her employer's world. She wasn't just a janitor, she was a survivor. A woman holding her life together for one small reason, her daughter Lily. Lily was 6, curious, gentle, and far too wise for her age. She spent her mornings coloring in the small utility room behind the mansion. "Mama," she'd say, "lifting her drawings one day will have a big house like this, and you won't have to clean it." Emily would smile, tired but soft. "Maybe one day, sweetheart." But that day wasn't kind to her. Vincent Cole, the billionaire who owned the house, had woken in one of his moods, sharp, demanding, ready to crush anything imperfect. He wanted every corner to shine, every glass to sparkle. If this place isn't flawless by tonight, he barked over the phone. "You're done here, Emily." She didn't answer. She just worked faster, the ache in her back growing heavier with every swipe of the mop. By noon, the mansion glimmered, but her hands were red and raw. She paused only when Lily tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, you didn't eat." Emily brushed her off with a weary smile. "Later, baby. Mr. Cole wants everything perfect." Across the street, at a small diner parking lot, a group of bikers had gathered, men in leather vests, drinking coffee from paper cups, the engines of their Harleys cooling in the sun. Their leader, Jack Dalton, leaned against his bike, arms crossed, watching the quiet neighborhood with the detached calm of someone who's seen too much. He wasn't a man who went looking for trouble. But that afternoon, trouble came looking for him. Inside the mansion, tension was building. Vincent's voice echoed from room to room, sharp as broken glass. "What is this? Look at this smudge. Are you blind?" Emily apologized again and again, her voice shaking, her hands clutching the rag like a lifeline. Lily stood frozen in the doorway, her wide eyes darting between her mother and the man yelling at her. Then it happened. Vincent shoved Emily so hard she hit the counter. The sound of the impact was dull but final. For a second, the world went still. And then, like something inside her snapped, Lily screamed. A sound so raw and terrified it sliced through every wall, through every layer of luxury and silence. She ran, past the grand staircase, through the glass doors, down the stone steps. Her small feet slapped against the hot pavement. She didn't look back. She didn't stop until she saw them, the bikers across the street, leather gleaming in the sunlight like armor. "Please," she cried, her breath ragged. "Please help my mama. The billionaire is beating her." Jack Dalton turned. He froze for half a second, studying the little girl, then tossed his coffee aside. "Where is she?" he asked, crouching to meet her eyes. Lily pointed back toward the mansion, her voice breaking. Inside. For a long beat, no one moved. The engine sat silent. The street held its breath. Then Jack straightened, jaw set. "Ryder Tucker, you're with me," he said. Engines roared to life, breaking the stillness like thunder. Tires squealed, birds scattered, and the sound rolled through the entire neighborhood. Across the street, curtains twitched as faces appeared behind glass, trying to see what was happening. Lily stood at the curb, clutching the hem of her dress, her tears drying in the wind. She didn't know if the men on those roaring bikes were angels or devils. All she knew was that someone had finally listened. Someone was going to help. As the motorcycles tore down the driveway toward the towering mansion, the world seemed to tilt. The story that would soon grip the nation began not with a headline, not with a camera, but with a child's cry for her mother. And nothing in Greenwood Hills would ever be the same again. The morning light poured through the massive glass walls of the Cole mansion, spilling across polished marble floors that gleamed like mirrors. From the outside, the house looked like something out of a magazine, cold, perfect, untouched by struggle. But inside it was a cage made of beauty and silence. Every reflection seemed to watch Emily Harper as she moved bucket in hand, mop dragging behind her. Her uniform was crisp, her posture straight, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who had been invisible for far too long. Emily had been working for Vincent Cole for almost 3 years. In that time, she had learned one rule: stay quiet, move fast, and never let anything look less than flawless. Vincent was the kind of man who built empires out of control. Everything he touched had to shine his company, his home, his image. People whispered that he was brilliant, ruthless, unstoppable. But those who worked under his roof knew the truth. His power fed on fear. That morning, Emily woke up before sunrise in the small servant quarters behind the mansion. She brushed her hair back neatly and tucked in her uniform shirt even though the fabric had begun to fade at the seams. In the next room, her daughter Lily still slept, curled under a thin blanket, her small hand clutching the corner of a drawing book. Emily stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her breathe. Every morning, she told herself the same thing: just one more day. Keep going for her. By 7, the mansion was already humming. The gardener's leaf blower whirred in the yard, the cook clattered pans in the kitchen, and Emily had begun her daily routine, dusting the crystal shelves, scrubbing the marble staircase, polishing the glass doors until they vanished from sight. She worked like a ghost, blending into the house she cleaned. In the late morning, Vincent's voice sliced through the air from the living room. "Emily," he shouted. She flinched but didn't stop moving. "Yes, sir," she called back. He stood at the top of the stairs, phone in hand, designer suit, pressed sharp as a blade. "I want the guest wing spotless by this afternoon. I have people coming tonight, important people." Not a single thing out of place, understood. "Yes, Mr. Cole." He didn't bother responding. He had already turned away, muttering into his phone about deals and deadlines. The sound of his shoes faded, but the tension stayed. Emily exhaled slowly and bent back to her work. Her knees ached, her wrists stung from bleach, but she moved with quiet precision. By noon, she slipped into the small laundry room, where Lily was coloring on the floor with a box of worn crayons. "Look, Mama," the little girl said, proudly, holding up a page covered in blue skies and big houses. "This one's ours one day." Emily smiled, though her heart squeezed tight. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Maybe it will be." Lily tilted her head. "And no one will yell at you there, right?" Emily froze. The words hit her harder than she expected. She forced a smile. "Right," she whispered. "No one will." Outside, the California sun baked the manicured lawn, making the air shimmer. Inside, the house smelled of lemon polish and quiet desperation. The other staff had finished for the day, but Emily stayed behind. Vincent had called twice already to remind her of perfection. She knew what that meant, every surface, every corner, even the places no guest would ever see. At 3 p.m., the delivery truck arrived with expensive catering supplies for the evening's event. Emily helped carry in trays and glassware, though her arms shook from exhaustion. When one of the waiters offered to help, she smiled politely and said, "I'm fine, thank you." She wasn't fine, but she couldn't afford to look weak. As the afternoon dragged on, the house began to transform. Chandeliers lit up like fire music played faintly from hidden speakers, and the walls of glass turned golden with the setting sun. Emily watched the light dance across the floor, her reflection appearing beside Vincent's in the mirrored wall. The contrast was stark, his tailored perfection next to her weary form. He didn't even notice she was there. Lily peeked out from the staff hallway barefoot, holding her little stuffed bunny. "Mama, can we go home soon?" she whispered. Emily glanced at the clock, nearly 6. "Soon, baby." "Just a little more, okay?" Vincent appeared again, holding a tumbler of whiskey. His smile was sharp and cold. "What is she doing here?" he asked, nodding toward Lily. "She's waiting quietly," Sir Emily said softly. "I didn't have anyone to watch her tonight." Vincent's expression hardened. "This is not a daycare, Emily. I expect professionalism. I understand, Mr. Cole. She won't be in the way." He took a slow sip of his drink, studying her like she was part of the furniture. "You have until sunset," he said finally. "If I see a single flaw, I'll make sure you never work in this town again." Emily nodded, holding her breath until he left the room. Her hands trembled as she turned back to the counter, scrubbing the same spotless surface over and over. As twilight descended over Beverly Hills, the mansion stood like a glass fortress, glowing against the dusk. Guests began arriving, men in expensive suits, women in shimmering dresses. Their laughter floated through the halls, easy and hollow. Emily kept to the corners, invisible, moving quietly with her cleaning cart. Every sound she made felt too loud. Every second felt like walking on ice. From the far end of the hall, Vincent's voice boomed again, charming and commanding for his guests. "Welcome, gentlemen. Tonight we celebrate success." But behind that voice was the same darkness that ruled the house, an arrogance built on fear. Emily worked faster, her back aching, her mind foggy from fatigue. The chandelier light made her dizzy. When she paused to steady herself, Lily's small face appeared at the doorway again, her eyes wide. "Mama, you're tired," she said softly. Emily smiled through the pain. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Just one more room." She turned to pick up her bucket, unaware that in the next few minutes her world was about to crack like the glass around her. The perfection Vincent demanded was about to shatter, and with it the silence that had ruled the house for far too long. The evening sun bled across the horizon, turning the glass walls of Vincent Cole's mansion into sheets of fire. Inside, music drifted faintly from hidden speakers, while laughter from wealthy guests echoed through the long marble hallways. It was supposed to be a night of elegance and power, a celebration of success. But beneath the shimmer of champagne and crystal, something darker was brewing, something fragile about to break. Emily Harper moved quietly among the shadows, her cleaning cart parked discreetly in the corner of the grand foyer. Every movement was deliberate, careful, invisible. Her hands trembled slightly from exhaustion, but she didn't dare stop. Vincent had been watching her all evening, his mood unpredictable, his patience thin. She had seen that look before, the one that meant he was searching for a reason to explode. From where she stood, she could hear him entertaining his guests, his deep voice slick with confidence. "Gentlemen," he said, raising a glass, "success isn't given, it's earned by those willing to dominate." Laughter followed, empty and cruel. Emily tried to ignore it, polishing the last of the glass banisters near the staircase. Her daughter Lily sat quietly in the laundry room down the hall, coloring to keep herself distracted. Every so often, Emily glanced toward the door, making sure her little girl was still safe. Then it happened, a moment so small, so ordinary, yet it shifted everything. A guest, already drunk, bumped into the buffet table. A glass of red wine spilled across the white carpet, staining it instantly. The sound of laughter stopped. Heads turned. Vincent's expression darkened like a storm cloud. Emily. His voice cracked through the air like a whip. She froze, heart pounding, before hurrying forward with a rag and cleaning spray. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll take care of it right away." "Take care of it." Vincent snapped, stepping closer. "This rug cost more than you'll make in 5 years. I'll clean it, sir. Please." But he wasn't listening. He crouched, grabbed the edge of the rug and yanked it hard, causing the table to rattle. A glass bottle toppled and shattered. His guests looked away uncomfortable, pretending not to see what was happening. "You call this professional," he spat. "You can't even keep a house clean for one night." Emily knelt, her face pale, her hands shaking as she tried to blot the stain. "Please, Mr. Cole, I just need a minute." Vincent's voice rose louder this time. "I told you I wanted perfection, not excuses." And then in front of everyone he threw the rest of his drink down onto the carpet, the liquid splashing across her hands. The crystal glass shattered beside her. Lily's voice echoed from the hallway. "Mama." The room went silent. Emily turned her eyes wide with fear. "Stay there, Lily," she said softly. But the little girl, sensing danger, ran forward. Vincent turned, glaring. "What's this? You brought your kid here. Are you insane?" "She's just a child," Emily said quickly. "She's not hurting anyone." "Get her out of here," he barked. Lily's small hands clutched her mother's apron. "Please don't yell at her," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please." Vincent's face twisted in fury. He stepped closer, his voice low but venomous. "You think you can embarrass me in front of my guests? You think you matter here?" Emily stood trembling but firm. "I'm just trying to do my job." "Your job," he shouted. "Your job is to listen." And before anyone could react, he shoved her hard. Emily stumbled backward, hitting the edge of the marble counter. The pain shot through her side. Gasps filled the room. One guest muttered something under his breath, but no one stepped forward. No one ever did. Lily screamed, a raw, terrified sound that cut through every layer of silence. She ran toward Vincent, tiny fists pounding against his leg. "Don't hurt my mama," she cried. Vincent looked down at her with disbelief, as if she were a nuisance rather than a child. "Get her away from me," he roared. Emily crawled forward, pulling her daughter into her arms. Her voice shook. "Please, sir, stop. She's just scared." Vincent's guests exchanged nervous glances. One man whispered, "Maybe you should calm down, Cole." But Vincent turned on him, his pride boiling over. "You don't tell me what to do in my house." The tension was unbearable. Emily's body trembled as she rose to her knees, holding Lily close. Her voice cracked. "Please, Mr. Cole, we'll leave. Just let us go." But Vincent wasn't hearing her anymore. His anger had crossed into something darker, a rage born from ego and humiliation. He grabbed her wrist, yanking her forward. She cried out in pain, and Lily screamed again, louder this time. That scream changed everything. It was a sound that carried through the open doors of the mansion, across the manicured lawns, down the quiet street, reaching the ears of the bikers who had stopped their engines only minutes before. Jack Dalton, leaning against his Harley, lifted his head. His instincts kicked in before his thoughts did. "You hear that?" he asked, turning to Ryder. The cry came again, high-pitched and desperate. Please help my mama." Jack didn't hesitate. "Ryder, Tucker, let's move." Inside the mansion, Emily's knees gave out. She slid to the floor, clutching her daughter as tears filled her eyes. "Please," she whispered, "we'll go. I'll never come back. Just let her go." Vincent released her arm, but not out of mercy, out of disgust. "Get out of my sight," he hissed. "You're fired." Emily tried to stand her vision swimming, but before she could reach the door, he shouted again, "And leave the keys. You'll never step foot here again." Outside, the distant growl of motorcycle engines began to rise, deep, rumbling, relentless. The sound rolled up the driveway like thunder. Vincent froze his head, turning toward the noise. His guests exchanged worried glances. "What the hell is that?" one of them muttered. The engines grew louder. The mansion's chandeliers trembled slightly from the vibration. Emily's breath hitched. She looked toward the front doors, her heart pounding, unsure if it was salvation or more fear on the way. Lily buried her face in her mother's neck, sobbing. And then, in a moment that would later be replayed in headlines and hearts across the country, the heavy wooden doors of the Cole mansion swung open. 3 men stepped inside their boots, echoing against the marble floor. The one in front, tall and broad with eyes like steel, looked straight at Vincent. Jack Dalton didn't say a word at first. He didn't need to. The air in the room shifted. The balance of power that had belonged to money and cruelty began to crumble. And for the first time that night, Vincent Cole looked like the one who was afraid. The roar of engines shook the quiet night, rolling up the steep driveway of the Cole mansion like thunder after lightning. Inside, laughter and arrogance died midair. The chandeliers trembled as the front doors burst open, and 3 figures stepped into the golden glow of the marble hall. Jack Dalton led them, his leather vest dark against the polished stone, his expression unreadable. Behind him were Ryder and Tucker, both silent, their boots heavy with purpose. Vincent Cole froze mid-step, still clutching the tumbler of whiskey in his hand. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, his voice trying to mask the tremor of surprise. Jack didn't answer right away. His eyes swept the room, the shattered glass, the spilled wine, and then Emily crouched on the floor clutching Lily. The little girl's cheeks were streaked with tears. Her mother's wrist was red and swollen. Jack's jaw tightened. He stepped forward, slow and deliberate. "We're the people who heard your name, screamed in fear," he said evenly. "That's not something we ignore." Vincent blinked, confusion flashing across his face before turning into anger. "You've got 5 seconds to get out of my house before I call the police," he snapped. Jack's gaze didn't waver. "You won't need to call them," he said. "They'll be here soon enough." For a moment, no one moved. The guests, 3 men in suits and 1 woman in a sequined dress, stood frozen, their earlier laughter replaced by silence. Tucker shifted his stance slightly, his hand resting casually on his belt buckle, but his eyes never left Vincent. "This is private property," Vincent said again, his voice louder now, his confidence crawling back under the weight of wealth and habit. "You don't belong here." Jack took another step forward until the distance between them was only a few feet. "Neither does what you just did to her." Vincent's face reddened. "I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but you're walking into the wrong house." Jack leaned in slightly, his voice calm but heavy with restrained fire. "No, I think we're finally in the right one." Ryder moved quietly to the side, scanning the hall. He noticed the shattered tumbler, the streak of wine on the floor, the faint mark on Emily's arm. "Looks like this guy's been having himself a party," he muttered. "Stay out of this," Vincent barked. "You don't know who I am." Jack's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "That's the problem, Vincent. You think your name still means something when you hurt people." It doesn't. The tension in the room tightened like a pulled wire. The air seemed to hum with the low growl of the Harleys still idling outside. Emily stood slowly, her body shaking, her daughter still clinging to her side. She didn't speak, but her eyes, wet, wide, exhausted, met Jack's. He gave her a small nod, silent reassurance that she wasn't alone anymore. Vincent scoffed and tossed back the rest of his drink. "This is ridiculous," he said, gesturing toward them. "3 bikers think they're heroes now. You don't know how the world works." Jack's tone stayed even. "You're right. In your world, money talks. In mine, men answer for what they do." One of the guests, shifting uncomfortably, finally spoke up. "Maybe you should just let them go, Vincent. The kid's scared." Vincent turned on him sharply. "Shut your mouth." That was the last straw. Jack's patience snapped not with rage, but with certainty. He took one step closer, his boots echoing through the hall. "You lay another hand on anyone in this house," he said quietly, "and I promise you'll find out what fear really feels like." Vincent's jaw clenched. He tried to shove past him, but Jack's arm came up fast, blocking him. The contact was brief, controlled, but it carried weight. Vincent stumbled slightly, eyes wide. "You don't scare me," he hissed. Jack's expression stayed steady. "I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to stop you." Behind them, Lily whimpered softly. The sound seemed to shatter whatever fragile control Emily had left. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "just let us leave." Jack turned his head toward her. "You're leaving," he said, "both of you." Ryder stepped forward, guiding Emily gently toward the door. Tucker stayed behind his broad frame, blocking Vincent's path. "You're making a mistake," Vincent growled. "You think people will believe your version of this? I'm a respected man." Jack stopped halfway to the door and looked back over his shoulder. Maybe they used to, but not after tonight. Vincent opened his mouth to retort, but the distant sound of sirens silenced him. The faint wail grew louder, closer. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. Emily turned, clutching Lily tighter. "You called them?" she asked softly. Jack shook his head. "No, someone else did. Maybe a neighbor. Maybe fate finally decided to listen." The red and blue lights began to flicker through the glass walls, painting the marble floor in flashes of justice. The officers arrived fast, 2 squad cars pulling up behind the row of bikes outside. When the front doors opened again, it wasn't Jack or his crew who spoke first, it was Emily. Her voice was soft but steady. "He hit me," she said simply, "in front of my daughter." The officer closest to her, a tall man with a calm face, nodded once. "Ma'am, we'll take it from here." He turned to Vincent, whose confidence had all but evaporated. "Sir, I'm going to need you to stay where you are." Vincent sputtered. "This is insane. They broke into my house." The officer's gaze flicked to Jack. "You, the one who called this in." Jack shook his head again. "No, sir. But we heard what happened. The girl came to us for help." The officer looked down at Lily, who was now holding tightly to her mother's leg. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes burned with something fierce defiance. Vincent tried one last time to take control. "You can't take my word against some janitor and a pack of bikers." The officer's expression didn't change. "We can when there's evidence. And witnesses." One of Vincent's guests stepped forward reluctantly. He did push her. It got out of hand. Vincent turned on him. "You coward." The officer moved, swiftly handcuffing Vincent before he could take another step. The metallic click of the cuffs echoed through the hall, final and absolute. As they led him outside, the reporters who had gathered at the gate began shouting questions. The mansion, once a symbol of perfection and control, was now a stage for disgrace. Emily stood in the doorway, tears streaming silently down her face. Jack walked over and draped his leather jacket over her shoulders. "Nobody lays hands on a woman like you," he said softly. "Not while I'm breathing." Lily looked up at him, her voice small but certain. "You came back for us." Jack crouched, meeting her gaze. "You called for help, kid. I just listened." The engines outside rumbled to life again. The night air was cool now, the chaos fading into the hum of Harley motors and police radios. As the bikers stood watching the squad car disappear down the hill, the mansion behind them loomed quiet and hollow, a house of glass finally stripped of its shine. For the first time in years, Emily Harper wasn't cleaning up someone else's mess. She was walking away from it. The next morning dawned softly over Beverly Hills, washing away the echoes of sirens and shattered pride. For the first time in years, Emily Harper woke to silence, not the silence of fear or exhaustion, but peace. The motel room she and Lily had been given was small, but it was warm, and sunlight streamed gently through the curtains. On the nightstand sat a single leather jacket folded neatly, carrying the faint scent of road dust and courage. Emily sat at the edge of the bed holding a cup of motel coffee, watching her daughter sleep. Lily's small hand was curled around the sleeve of the jacket, her breath steady and calm. For weeks, Emily had dreamed of safety, of a night where no shouting could reach her. No threat could steal her child's laughter. Now that moment had come, and she barely knew how to feel. Relief, gratitude, a quiet ache for everything she'd lost and everything she still had. A knock came at the door, soft but firm. "It's Jack," said a voice from outside. Emily opened it to find Jack Dalton standing in the morning light holding 2 paper cups of coffee and a brown paper bag. His usual stern expression had softened. "Didn't mean to wake you," he said, handing her the bag. "Got pancakes for the kid, sandwich for you." She blinked, taken aback. "You didn't have to do that." Jack shrugged. "Didn't have to do a lot of things. Guess that's how I ended up here." She smiled faintly, the kind that came from somewhere deeper than politeness. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet, "for everything." He took a seat near the window, sipping his coffee. The two sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the early traffic hum down the street. Lily stirred awake, rubbing her eyes, then grinned when she saw Jack. "You came back," she said, voice still groggy. "Told you I would," he replied, smiling. "And I don't break promises." Lily sat up already, nibbling at her pancakes. "Mama says we're going to be okay now," she said proudly. Jack looked at Emily, who nodded. "We will be," she said more to herself than to him. Later that day, a knock came again. This time it was the officer who had handled the case the night before. He was out of uniform, dressed in plain clothes, but his expression carried the same steady kindness. "Miss Harper," he began, "I wanted to let you know that Vincent Cole's been charged. Turns out there were other complaints, former employees who'd been too afraid to come forward. Your story opened the door for them." Emily's eyes widened. "Other people?" The officer nodded. "You gave them courage. You didn't just stand up for yourself. You stood up for every person he ever made feel small." She pressed a trembling hand to her chest. "I didn't mean to start anything," she whispered. Sometimes, the officer said, the right kind of change starts by accident. When he left, Jack leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching her quietly. "See, you did more than survive. You made something right." Emily shook her head, her eyes glistening. "I don't feel brave." Jack smiled gently. "Bravery's not about feeling ready, it's about doing it anyway." That evening, the rumble of familiar engines filled the motel parking lot. Lily rushed to the window, her face lighting up, as she saw the line of motorcycles pulling in. Ryder waved. Tucker lifted a grocery bag in greeting. When they came inside, the tiny room filled with laughter and warmth. "We brought supplies," Tucker said, setting down the bags. "Cereal, milk, fruit, and something for the kid." He handed Lily a small toy Harley made from scrap metal. "Custom build," he said with a grin. Lily giggled, holding it up proudly. "Thank you, Mr. Tucker." Jack smirked. "Now you've done it, she's going to want one that runs." They all laughed, the kind of laughter that eases the heaviness in a room. Emily stood back for a moment watching them. The men the world saw as rough and dangerous were sitting cross-legged on the floor, helping her daughter fix a broken toy bunny. It was a picture she never could have imagined a week ago. The following week, Emily received a call from the local community center. A woman's voice on the other end said, "We heard your story. We'd like to offer you a position here part-time, cleaning full-time pay, and a place to stay above the bakery on Maple Street." Emily covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Are you sure?" "We're sure," the woman said kindly. "People like you deserve a new start." When she hung up, she turned to Jack, who was standing by the doorway. "They offered me a job," she said, her voice trembling. "And a home." Jack grinned. "Then that's where you're headed." A week later, Emily and Lily moved into their new apartment. It wasn't large or fancy, but it was theirs. The smell of fresh bread drifted up from the bakery downstairs, and the sunlight poured through wide windows. Lily taped her drawings to the walls, one of a house, one of a motorcycle, and one of a man with a kind smile standing beside her mother. Every Sunday, the bikers came by. Mrs. Patel, the bakery owner, saved them a table near the window and always had extra pancakes ready for Lily. The laughter that once filled the Cole mansion with arrogance now lived here in a small apartment above a bakery, wrapped in warmth and gratitude. One afternoon, as the bikers prepared to leave, Lily handed Jack another drawing. This one showed her mother and the bikers sitting together, sunlight pouring in. Above them, in wobbly handwriting, she'd written, "My family." Jack studied it for a long time, then folded it carefully and slipped it inside his vest. "You've got talent, kid," he said softly. "Keep drawing the good stuff." As the motorcycles rumbled down the street and the sun dipped low over Maple Street, Emily stood by the window, holding Lily close. The girl looked up at her and whispered, "Mama, we're really home, aren't we?" Emily smiled through her tears. "Yeah, baby, we finally are." And somewhere in the distance, the sound of engines faded into the horizon, not a noise of chaos this time, but of freedom. The world had broken her once, but now in its own unexpected way it had given her back her peace. When the story of Emily Harper and her daughter Lily came to an end, it wasn't just the closing of a chapter, it was the rebirth of two lives. What began as a cry for help in a quiet California neighborhood turned into a powerful journey of courage, justice, and healing. Emily had spent years living in the shadows, cleaning the floors of people who never bothered to remember her name. Her world was made of silence, exhaustion, and sacrifice, all for the sake of the little girl she loved more than anything. But on that terrible night when Vincent Cole's cruelty reached its peak, the silence finally broke. And in that moment, everything changed. The bikers of Redwood Street didn't plan to be heroes that day. They were just men passing through, bound by loyalty and a code of honor that the world often overlooks. Yet, when Lily's desperate voice reached them, they answered without hesitation. Their rumbling engines became the sound of protection, their courage the light that shattered the darkness of the Cole mansion. In the space of a few heartbeats, power shifted from money and ego to humanity and strength. Emily's fall became her rise. She lost her job, her fear, and the chains of invisibility that had bound her for years. What she gained instead was priceless dignity, freedom, and the chance to start again. The woman who once cleaned other people's homes now walked with her head held high, not because someone saved her, but because she chose to stand again after being broken. Her daughter's courage became her guiding light, and the biker's rough, scarred but true became proof that goodness can come from the most unexpected places. Her story teaches us something deeply human, that no act of courage is too small, and no life is too unimportant to change. It reminds us that we all have the power to make a difference, not by being perfect, but by being present, by listening, by caring. In a world where people often look away from pain, Emily's story asks us to look closer, to act when others remain silent, and to remember that kindness is a form of strength, not weakness. So, if you take one thing from this story, let it be this: never underestimate the power of one voice, one choice, one moment of compassion. You never know whose life it might save, or how it might change your own. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to our channel. Your support gives us the strength to keep creating stories that inspire, uplift, and remind us that even in a world full of noise, kindness still echoes the loudest.